We roll the dice and double down, thinking our moral coffers are always chock full to the brim. Our cash cup runneth over, we think. We never stop to check the balance in the account. We just bet, and then bet some more. We're gambling with every single stance we espouse, my friends. We climb high on these ideological hills, planting our flags of opinion. I claim this land for Spain. Magellan, he gambled too. Well, nobody had taken that route before. Sometimes it pays off. Sometimes, well, we look at our hand and confidently ask the dealer to hit. Hit! I don't care that I've got 20. I'm pulling an ace, baby! Except that when it comes to moral dilemmas, do we really have an ace up our sleeve? Or is it more like we're hoping our fairy tale is better than everybody else's, and even if we're wrong, we'll be forgiven, right? It's part of the deal. Every Sunday, 10%, eat the cracker, forgiven, right? No matter what, just gotta ask for it. What is at the core of our arrogance as a people? We go about our lives forming opinions based on very little of the relevant information necessary to even be objective. Yet here we are, being wrong all over the place. We brush it aside like it doesn't matter, because we just move to the next thing to be wrong about, and we never give it that much thought. After all, who's hanging around us keeping score, right? Well, for many, there is a religion or spirituality at play. There are a lot of teachings and rules and all of that sort of thing about just how we're supposed to treat our fellow humans. Yet, we ignore those teachings, don't we? So many of them we ignore. In our pursuit of polemic pride, prejudice, and ego and elitism, we sacrifice our souls, swearing to the stances we take in issues about which we know very little. If one has a spirituality, and if that spirituality is one of final judgment for one's actions in this life, to deem one worthy of an afterlife that isn't unseasonably warm, then one must consider what's at stake when you put all your chips in and double down on red. And welcome to the podcast. In this series, we're going to talk about a certain sect of our society that sort of historically have consistently had a tendency to slow down the progress of humankind. Often they become our stereotypes, which we allow to be perpetuated over and over and over. Stereotypes exist for a reason. Rarely are they positive. Often they're simply caricatures of existing behaviors or traits. Exaggerations we use to compartmentalize people. Those stereotypes become prejudicial if we aren't careful. I grew up with a spectrum of prejudice. Prejudice where you're just for whatever reason more inclined to choose one thing over another. I'm prejudiced towards smooth peanut butter. However, I was once very prejudiced against it. Once in my life, I would have sworn by crunchy peanut butter. And I once would joke about how anyone who puts something other than grape jelly on a PB&J should be executed. Today, I've grown past that horrible joke. I appreciate the complex profile one gets with peanut butter and maybe a strawberry. I don't prefer it, but I accept it. Raspberry, that's good. I am prejudiced toward grape jelly on a smooth PB&J. You could say that before I was a strawberry PB&J bigot, or bigot against anything but a great PB&J. Except, I used to swear by crunchy peanut butter, right? And now I like smooth, like normal people. And clearly, this is an actual thing in my life. But I hope you can see it's a metaphor. Prejudice makes sense. It's basically an uninformed or biased opinion. Bigotry, that's darker. That's the flat-out intolerance of the other view. If you live in a world where you just believe smooth PB and grape J are the way, bigotry are the jokes and attitudes and trauma those cause, those infectious and cyclical traits that, if not stopped dead in its tracks, it festers. Racism, or any of the isms, sexism, anti-Semitism, or people phobias, even transcends bigotry, because whereas a bigotry is that fervent belief that it should only be great PB and Js, the ism is now where our minds believe action should be taken to, pardon the pun, preserve the sanctity of the grape PB and J. Because one day we're going to go to order a grape PB and J from the place, and those people are going to ask me if I want a grape or strawberry PB and J, and I don't want to press 1 for English. From the recreation we choose, to the brands we consume, to the ideals we embody through our lives. Swearing some sort of idol worship loyalty to these products, logos, and ideals without any real justification for it seems on the surface as harmless consumer loyalty. But a deeper look at the potential cost of some of that loyalty might put things into a different perspective. Marlboro bucks. Remember in the 80s, you could save this make-believe money. Save it up and go on a wild shopping spree. We do the same thing now, it's just called merch. It seems harmless enough, right? But when we view that collection of fictitious currency through the perspective of spiritual priorities, moral dilemmas, we compromise our religious and basic human morals each and every day, just as I've laid out. Those Marlboro bucks may not directly cause the cancer, but you have to smoke a lot of the cancer to get that handy-dandy red cooler. And here's where it's going to be hard to hear. We are responsible for our choices, be it suicide by cigarette or even our own bigotry. We're responsible for our biases and prejudices. These may come from somewhere, and hopefully through the course of this show, you'll begin overthinking everything and realize that while the fires of our traumas may have a source that we probably couldn't help, we are ultimately responsible for how we continue to navigate through that trauma. Just like those Marlboro bucks. You got the cooler and the jacket. Congratulations. You accomplished something. You're going to miss your granddaughter's graduation, though. You did that. You chose that. You had a decision each and every day, and you made it. Thy body is a temple. I know. A lot of this isn't really easy, and for that, I'm sorry. We don't always choose our own adventure, but we have to admit, sometimes we kinda do. Turn to page 126 to confront some hard truths. Our bigotry is, as I said, steeped in self-loathing for those choices we know we make or don't. We don't do enough. We don't help when we know we can, and we excuse and, yeah, but that into the ground to justify our complacency and ambivalence because, yeah, but makes it easier than facing the fact that we are not good people. What separates man from beast? Sentience, a soul, a higher purpose of protection, wards of Eden, if you will, groundskeepers, caretakers. It says so pretty early in the book, actually. In the next episode, I'm stripping down our religions, many of them, to find out what really matters. And maybe you'll draw your conclusions about a different perspective on sin. I'm not a religious scholar. I'm not a religious person, but I believe in a basic set of human principles. And I compromise those each and every day. And I feel it. I realized it. I acknowledge it. It makes me angry at myself for not doing more sooner. And that makes me angry at others. And it's a vicious cycle of negative energy. It fucks up my chi. But so much of what we fall into as humans, it's just a big marketing ploy to cover up cultism. Not just consumerism, but religion and politics today too. As we discussed in Pen Pals, so much of it is sheep mentality, which Penner you heard it into. In this series, Selling Our Souls, I'll share with you my observations on how to prevent those sheep from turning into lemmings. And the tragic reality of the whole lemmings thing is for another episode, but look that up when you've got some time. We're playing games with our eternal souls, if you believe in that sort of thing. I tend to, a little, so it's a topic I like to discuss. It isn't my place to save anybody. Hell, I probably need saving. But what I've seen unfold in my lifetime, just in recent years, it defies politics. It's beyond religion. It's beyond American borders. It's bigger than our culture, bigger almost than our entire civilization. Because what I'm going to discuss and lay out for you here is the test of the human soul, the ultimate test for we, the species, a test of character and a higher definition of integrity, morals, and ethics, and better judgment. Values. Just like any first marriage, irreconcilable differences occur, just like the Revolutionary War, just like the Civil War, like today in our society, in our homes, in our families and workplaces and churches and social circles. Sometimes a parting of the ways is necessary from people, from churches, from working relationships, from ourselves. We set our own examples. We define ourselves. I lived for so long trying to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be, and not anymore. And I encourage you to define yourself, not by a label so much, a political party, a religious affiliation, or church, but define yourself by what you hold dear in your heart without accounting for what anyone else thinks or thinks you should think. And that's hard, redefining yourself. Because it doesn't matter. It doesn't. I assure you, none of it matters. None of what we stress out about, none of it matters. The things we fight about, none of it matters more than your immortal soul. Later this season, when I discuss my spiritual journey out of this culture, you'll find out more about how my dad basically started a church one day. It was a rift at my childhood church, and people just left and started their own church. And look, I'm not sure what spiritual consultation my father or those people got when they broke away from my grandmother's church. Dad described it as supernatural, that they took turns preaching and hosting services, and it was the first time he truly felt like he was fellowshipping with God. I can't really knock it if it brought him some kind of high. I mean, that's what we turn to religion for, you know? Comfort and joy. But without any real preacher or formal training in these doctrines, these people just picked up their Bibles and started church. Like, imagine if a bunch of guys just took some memories of stuff some guy said years and years earlier and just started, holding meetings in the back rooms of businesses, furniture stores and whatnot, and people's homes, preaching their perspective on what he meant all that time ago. Right? Eventually it strained. Too many chefs in the kitchen. They brought in a minister or three. My point is, they just made up their own rules. Everyone does. We compromise those rules. each and every single day. I've seen our society shift in a direction with which I am all too uncomfortable. You see, I don't like the way I see the world, what goes on in my head, some of the content I create, the way I think I see things going sometimes. I don't want a world like that. I'm trying to warn against it. Because my world, the way I see it, it's fine and dandy when I'm the one running the show. Go see my video on human rights. The problem is, eventually you aren't running the show anymore. And that's when it sucks. Because I was raised on dystopian stuff like Star Wars and the Empire. Everybody wants to be Darth Vader when he's badass hacking up kids in the temple. Nobody wants to be Vader on the funeral pyre. What we're seeing now is what happens when you have a sect of humanity who require fairy tales and mortal fear-mongering in order to behave in a humane, civilized, and moral manner. Not religious morals, human morals. I know. Who am I to talk about morals? I'm not fit to be anybody's example for anything. Except maybe how to love and fight for your kid. I'm not even so sure I did that right, you know? I'm not here to play morality police. That's laughable on all levels. What I'm going to talk about is my own journey out of darkness. A lot of that came with humility. I know, from me. But admitting to myself I was wrong, admitting I was a horse's ass, admitting that I was toxic, F as the kids would say. My understanding this segment of our society and culture, as well as the toxicity that has grown out of it, comes from being raised in it, surrounded by it, immersed in it, fighting like hell to escape it since as early as I can remember. But it also comes through the experience of seeing that nothing in this world really matters all that much. We have to hold things dear and sacrosanct, yes, but more importantly, as individuals and as a culture, it's long overdue for us to re-examine the things we currently draw as hard lines in the sand. I assure you, if you step back from it, it's costing you more than you think you're getting from it. Whatever the it in question is, it might be costing you your soul. Is that something you're willing to wager? I know the topics are taboo: guns, abortion, religion, politics, but just like marriage equality, I know so many people who thought 15 years ago that was what was going to destroy America and bring Jesus back Rambo style. Today, those voices are silenced for the most part. Fringe hate keeps the embers of ignorance glowing, but we've largely progressed from that, haven't we? We'll see. We evolve. Society evolves, and it doesn't change the fact that we compromise core values with our beliefs and taking the hardline stances, not backing down and betting the house that we're right. Well, who says we're right? 15 years ago to today, where do you stand on an issue? And what moved the needle for you? Couldn't we reckon that there might be a possibility that maybe, just maybe, what we think we know now might be something we reconsider later in life? And later in life, if we've reconsidered our positions, how will we look back on our former selves for how we portrayed ourselves, our beliefs, and how we treated others? Will we seek to understand why we turn to the dark side? Cultism comes in many forms, many of them seemingly harmless. And this is talking about cultism from the standpoint of how we react to it. One of my all-time favorite performers, you might find this odd, is Barry Manilow. I love Barry Manilow. I have an 8x10 glossy I begged a record rep for back in my radio days. Oh, I should put that up somewhere. I love Barry Manilow, his story, his music. If you look behind me right here, it is fifth one from the bottom. On the bookshelf, his autobiography, Sweet Life, is there. I've read it at least 5 times, maybe 6. It's really inspiring. I stumbled on his greatest hits on vinyl, double album, in a thrift shop when I was in college, and I bought it as a gag. I put it on my turntable and figured the fellas had come in, crank the tunes up, and we'd have a good chortle about what came on. But you know what? I was drawn in within the first 30 seconds of Mandy. I may not, or may be working on a musical based on Barry Manilow. He's the one living artist in my top 10 that I've never seen live. He's probably my top 3. I have him as a favorite in my car radio, so I can hear him anytime he comes on. And I think at this point in my life, in his life, if he did another live performance, I think I'd fly there for it, honestly. And honestly, it stops there. Like a concert and I'd be good, Unless Barry and I become best friends and he takes me with him like a little sidekick, I'm going to get back to my real life and I'll download the show when I get home. I'm pretty lazy when it comes to things like that. I loved Star Wars for a lot of my life. My ex-wife would buy me toys. Like, I enjoyed the movies and playing with the toys when I was a kid, and I liked reading the books as an adult. But why in 7 hells would I want a Darth Vader voice-changing mask? I'm a voice actor. I did that. But I know other people who are grown men with man caves dedicated to the silly shit they played with as kids. I know guys who have an entire room dedicated to the colleges they never even attended. I mean, hell, if I had unlimited funds, I'd probably collect G.I. Joes, have a whole room set up full of them. But why? I might make YouTube stories with them, maybe. Who knows? I know. What the hell am I even talking about? Cults, G.I. Joe, Manilow, the Marlboro Man, Vader, and toys. Cultism, from the perspective of how we follow along with things under some sort of ecstatic fervor, almost blind to fact or reason, is exactly what I'm discussing when I talk about deconstructing a culture of cultism. It is this minor, seemingly harmless cultism, simple hobbies or fandom that gets out of hand, that can lead us down the path to bigger threats of cultism, cults of personality, politics, or religion. Do you know how much a trip to Vegas to see Manilow would be? Or wherever he is? Thousands of dollars by the time the trip's over. A G.I. Joe collection today, a full collection, would be worth God knows how much. Star Wars alone nets how much profit off of just merchandise related to Baby Yoda? One character? So regardless of your level of wealth, we're committing valuable resources, money, and time and attention to things that ultimately don't matter. They bring us joy, sure, harmless enough, if we're keeping ourselves in check. Barry Manilow has no idea Josh Brandon even exists. Even if he did, I'm certainly not his biggest fan. We're never going to be the best friends I fantasize about. I do often have cutaways in my mind, mid-conversation, where that actually is a thing, but bygones. G.I. Joes are sort of rare and nostalgic, but what good is that really going to do you if you aren't selling them or keeping them for value? Guess what? I stopped with Star Wars after Disney said the novels that I had spent years reading weren't canon and didn't count. I was like, God, what's the point then? A lot of time wasted. Some of those books weren't good. Some were some were bad. And I don't miss it. I've seen the movies. Meh. It just isn't that important in the grand scheme of things. I know. Watch The Mandalorian. I did. It was good. Book of Boba Fett was better. It's all very decent. Marvel, the whole superhero genre, it's all very decent. It's okay. Fast and Furious 14 or whatever. It's okay. Very, very okay. Nothing you feel that passionately or strongly about is that important. Even that social issue you just won't budge on, it's costing you. Because you think you're taking the moral high road, but the hypocritical compromises you make along the way to that reasoning could be costly. The things we think are so important to us, they just aren't, are they? What is? Honestly, what is important enough to be unbudgeable, to wager your eternal soul? Now, you're taking a hard enough stand on an issue that could have dire effects on another person. So let's discuss what really does matter to you. Easy answer. Family. My daughter. Fine. My marriage? Maybe. I'm on number 2. Clearly, I've already decided that marriage isn't a permanent structure. I'm not saying anything about where I'm at now. It's just, in the legal world, they call it precedent, and I can't argue by my own actions of severing a marriage that I pledged eternity to that marriage is forever. I compromised that. I don't get to look anyone in the eye and make that promise and expect to be believed, regardless of my intent. So with the argument on marriage equality being the sanctity of marriage, I just have to ask the straight folk, how's that worked out for you? Nice half a house and shit you got there. I'll grant children might be the immovable rock in the road for this conversation. At least for me, that's really the thing I can't compromise. As undefinable as that may seem, but as a parent, can we really say that? I know I hit a nerve when I spoke about daycare in the previous episode. Spawn aside, what is important enough to risk everything? Nothing. And that's not defeatist or depressing, it's liberating. I miss my dad, I miss my brother, I miss my granny, I miss my nana, but life moved on. Just like it will for my kid when the center of her universe just magically no longer exists. It doesn't mean we shouldn't care. It means we should accept some things differently than maybe we currently do. I value life through this acknowledgement. My dad, as toxic and problematic as he was my best friend and cornerstone while he was alive. He's gone. I found new friends and cornerstones. I did away with the need to have some of that. I cherish the memory of him, good and bad, but accept it, and I moved on. I had to. You have to. And it doesn't mean that my dad wasn't important. It means I need to adjust how important adhering to some ideal of his memory is. We tend to glorify the unattainable, the dead or the famous. It becomes almost this sort of idol worship. This due in memory of him. I'm this because my daddy would have wanted me to be. And not being this dishonors my daddy. I wonder how many people vote that way. I wonder how many people joined the military or went to a specific college based on that reasoning. Life path decisions made because of this subconscious loyalty or obligation to someone else's ideals, which may not have even been their own. Or pure happenstance, like the in-memory stickers on the back of cars or any monument memorializing the dead. Doesn't make any sense. But this display makes people feel more connected. They aren't ready to let go or move on. And that's fine. But we must recognize that in this sort of grief reflex, there is a level of idol worship. I have photos of my dad and Barry Manilow. I've talked to them once or twice, here or there. Haven't you? Okay, maybe not to the Barry picture, but Okay, definitely to the berry picture, but we must recognize where we cross the line into sort of elevating a person or idea above what we should hold most sacrosanct. How many of us have knelt at a grave and spoken to someone who wasn't there? Aren't we somehow violating some part of our spirituality? We aren't praying to God, but we're sort of praying to this ghost of someone? And isn't that kind of like a seance? Beware of how we justify our reasonings. No spoilers, but a future episode, perfect around Columbus Day, Cracking the Commandment Code, will offer some additional insight on this slippery slope of reverence and worship. Just to say, beware of your priorities, even in spirit. Politics can be the same way. That cult of personality I spoke about before. It becomes that this star says something, and we're so eager and desperate to fit in or feel connected that we begin to identify with it, whether we actually fundamentally agree with it or even understand it or not. We repeat and parrot those attitudes. This is very true in politics, but also in life. If you've raised kids, you've been through the bad influence at least once. You know, that kid you're just not sure your kid should hang around with. Well, if you haven't, congratulations, you've raised everyone else's bad influence. But these are the moral struggles we face as parents. We want to teach our child to love everybody, to treat everyone with kindness and openness. Except when they bring home the kid who sends up about every red flag you've ever seen in a child. We steer our children away from clearly poor social influences so the problem child doesn't drag our kid down. Why don't we see it that way now that we're adults? We either become who we're around or we're bold enough to be the one people try to emulate. And that's an easy sort of social current to follow. It is so hard to fight the current, to be in the toxic work atmosphere and stand up saying, hey, that's really inappropriate. That's exhausting, and it swims against the flow. It's easier to just let that go and focus on the big picture. Doesn't really matter, except until it does. See, some of these issues do matter. Toxicity needs to be addressed every time. Education, that is the only humane cure. We keep our kids from hanging around the problem child because eventually we see personality traits and attitudes evolve into our child. Rare is it that the good kid influences the problem kid. That's TV. It's often the other way around. Negative is stronger than positive. More powerful? It's at least more aggressive and infectious. Negative is certainly easier. And that's when your little angel gets caught with cigarettes or worse. That's why, a month before the 2016 presidential election, so many of us were distraught that more people didn't flee from the problem child after the Access Hollywood tape. After mocking the disabled reporter or paying off the porn star with hardworking taxpayer dollars, compromising our morals simply to justify the opinion we were told to have, selling our immortal souls. For what? As passionate as I am about my beliefs, I also understand that there's a bigger picture where those aren't as important as I make them out to be. And when I say this, I'm talking about the arguing over it. The principles of the issue, vital, of course. Whether it's racial equality or justice, a woman's right to choose, the right to education and health care, weapons and wars, human and civil rights, the idea that food, clean air, clean water, shelter should be provided for living creatures, immigration issues, infrastructure, anything else. These principles are important, and critical to those impacted by these issues, which I will argue are each and every one of us. But to us individually, each and every day, how important are they? As arguing points, as points of identification, if you think about it that way. Personality traits. Oh, Brad? Yeah, he's a gun nut. Who among us is an expert in any one of these issues I mentioned before? A true expert. Not like, I read an article or majored in political science and sell insurance now expert. I mean like a real, actual expert. Yet we talk like we are. I do. And I am comfortable with my own education, knowledge, and level of research on things I choose to discuss. I am not always comfortable with others' scrutiny. Dunning-Kruger, your table is now available. Coming up, we're wrapping up the Selling Our Soul series and hammering home an homage to humility. I'm going to look at my own background as a case study in cultism culture to showcase my belief that we're all the byproducts of the fortune or misfortune of happenstance and generational trauma. That everything about our lives traces back to these little moments that could have changed everything, better or worse. But it's not that these moments are things to reflect on with regret and coulda, shoulda, woulda. That's fodder for daydreams. It's the revelation that these moments that mattered most, many of these moments were motivated by the manipulation of others. We've been setting the stage here in Selling Our Souls that these hills of opinion we climb on, we climb so hard to die on these hills, we're wagering our eternal souls by the morality of our own spiritualities. I'm making the point that ultimately we place this unbudgeable importance on these issues that may or may not affect us when, in the grand scheme of it all, well, to quote the late Freddie Mercury, nothing really matters. Nothing really matters to me. And this is the slippery slope of Cartesian deconstruction, folks. The unwinding of everything you thought you knew about everything you thought you knew, and starting from scratch. Asking those big questions. It sort of becomes this snowball of questioning, rolling down the hill, gathering more and more and more momentum as more and more questions load up on this growing snowball, and it's barreling faster and faster toward crashing into eventual understanding or destruction. Yeah, deconstruction. When we take the con out, it's just destruction. I'm tying that string of my sweater to a souped-up DeLorean and tossing all my trauma into Mr. Fusion, watching that silver Sportster peel away and unravel everything at 88 miles an hour, dragging us along for the ride, back to my past, to explain the future. The next episode is the road rash of this little cross-culture adventure. It's going to hurt me way more than it hurts you, because I am opening up the curtains and showing you inside my life as I deconstruct my culture of cultism. Thank you so much for joining me. Check out some of my other videos and catch up on all of Overthinking Everything in its own playlist on YouTube. Make sure you join me live for the after party on YouTube and at TikTok. I've got all my original music for you on YouTube, and if you would, follow me on TikTok, like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and do all the things I need you to do to help me grow. And if you like this series, consider a donation to Cash App, or subscribe to my Patreon. I'm Josh Brandon, and I'm Overthinking Everything.